Hey folks, and welcome to episode 5 of The Cover Photographer, and we're going to do street photography from the window. So watch on and see how I managed to do this, but good if you've got limited mobility. Hey folks, so street photography from the window. So most houses will overlook a street that you can look down upon, and at this time of year you've got really good shadows that you can actually capture people in. And if you're just using standard kit lens, which is the lens I wanted to talk about a little bit this episode, which on a cropped camera, an APS-C typical camera most people would have, is an 18 to 55, and this lens is really versatile and allows you to perfectly frame the shots. Now my favourite focal length is 23mm, but that's also marked on this lens. I'm going to go into more detail about this lens I think in another episode, because when you get the update about how I'm getting on, you'll understand why this is going to be a fairly short one. But I picked sort of 3 scenes with some lovely shadows on, and I just waited at the window, and I've taken a few landscapey shots that I'll bring up as well. Of the cityscape. I want to do some night photography of the city when I'm feeling better as well, before I go back to my house, because I'm still over at my parents'. But again, what we've done this time is we've looked for some shadows and light, and we've waited for people to walk past that. In some instances I have just used the pavement to frame people with some focal point of some flowers in the image, but mostly I've framed people is they're transitioning from the shadow into the light, or vice versa. And you can shoot through the window if you wish. You don't have to open the window. You can do this from a seated position, and I'm actually quite surprised that I've got some fairly reasonable shots. The best thing about it was that it actually made me feel like I've done street photography for the first time in 2 months, which I was really missing. And I woke up this morning feeling terribly anxious, and doing the street photography has really helped that anxiety. And I thought I was actually having one of my worst days. I've suddenly gone from a really bad day to a fairly average day, and I seem to be managing much better. So one of the things I've really struggled with is a combination of fatigue and anxiety. And you've got to give yourself time to rest, even though you're keen to go back to getting back to normal. And for example, I was trying to do stair exercises every day, which wasn't giving me a chance to rest. Now, when you're fit and healthy, you take climbing the stairs for granted. I don't. And that was what caused fatigue. And then I woke up this morning feeling anxious. Anyway, I said it was a big update, but I don't want to dwell on it too much. That essentially is what I'm having as the problem. So going back to the camera, to make things easy for me, I've got the camera on the strap around my neck. I'm setting the camera to aperture priority, so I can control the aperture. So most of these images are going to be taken at f9. I'm letting the camera do the shutter. Because it's strong light and shadows, what we're doing is we're putting -1 EV, so we're telling the camera's auto exposure to underexpose a little bit, because often the shadows will be overexposed if you do that, because the camera sees the light and it'll deliberately underexpose things. So you might want to drop the exposure down to -1 EV so it doesn't overexpose the bright bits, depending on where you're taking the picture or where the camera does the metering from. Sorry, got that back to front. So essentially, yes, you're -1 EV to stop the highlights, being overexposed, or having your shadows a little bit overexposed as well. I'm basically telling the camera to expose the whole image 1 stop darker than I would normally like, because it's quite strong contrasts of colour. So usually when you're doing street photography, you've got shadows, you often do want to slightly underexpose the image, because often the subject isn't exactly where you want them, or they might be in the light or part on the light, and the camera's metering can get confused. So it's quite important that you look at that and keep an eye on that, and do some test shots before somebody walks into the scene. Again, I'm using constant autofocus and I'm using subject tracking so that the camera can actually track the subject. So, as always, I've been bringing up some of these the pictures as I've been talking, and I've obviously showed you right at the start the various areas where I was going to take the pictures. There was about 3 or 4 I'd chosen. So I hope you can try this, and if you've got, you're really stuck in the house and you really like street photography or the idea of it, do try shooting from the window. You can do it through the window. Think of the window as a filter. If it's dirty, it adds to it. Street photography is all about style and design. So I've taken a few shots, as I say, through the window. I've taken some shots, I've opened the window, and I've got a mixture, and we'll see what they come out like, because they look okay on the camera. You're seeing them for the first time now, so for what I've seen on the camera, they look pretty good. So, but I'm going to process them. I'm going to put my little style on them with my CineSoft filter that I have in Lightroom, and we'll see what they turn out like. Anyway, folks, I know it's a short one. Please do discuss in the comments below. Please ask if you've got any questions about my recovery or about the photography. I'm happy to answer them, and maybe we'll go into more detail about the ideal lens for you to start with in not just street photography, but any photography. The most overlooked lens of all time, but probably the best lens. And I'll tell you what, I overlook this lens, the 18 to 55 lens. Most cameras have one, who are on what we call an APS-C format camera, which is what I normally do my street photography on. It's called a cropped camera. It's not like a full frame where the sensor in the camera is the same size as 35mm film. We'll talk about full frame cameras and sensor sizes after, because I can borrow my dad's Micro Four Thirds cameras, which is another sensor size. So, again, going back to that, please do like, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. And I'll be back soon with another episode of The Code Photographer. This was all done in one take. See you later, folks. Bye.